Good evening. Welcome to the Worldview 2 Washington Report for tonight, July 7th, 2025. Joining me now is our co-host, Jim Pfaff. Jim, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us after a week off.
Good to see you, sir. I hope you had at least some rest during that time.
I got one day off. Other than that, I was busy fighting in part with the IRS, who just stole $50,000 from me they were not entitled to. I'll get into it in tonight's show. The weaponization of the IRS continues under the Trump administration, which I heard talk to one of Trump's closest people over the weekend, who said, Brandon, I have my own IRS story. You're right. This is still happening even under Donald Trump.
Well, let's just be candid about the IRS as an institution. It does not have to operate under the rule of law.
That's right.
It operates independently of anything. There is no court you can go to.
That's right. That
can reasonably do anything when you're wronged. We have to recognize, and it's so funny. I have people progressive Christians argue against me with this all the time, but taxation is theft.
Yep.
And we need to understand what that means. Like, a lot of people think, what? You mean like the government are just like all the people looting all the stores in Los Angeles or whatever? Well, actually, to be candid, not far from that, but we authorize some taxes through through legislation and the fact that the American people, sadly, approved the 16th Amendment back in the early 20th century, which was a huge problem. So, but the thing is, everything that we produce from our efforts belongs to us.
Yep.
If we give it in taxes, under the system we have, we do so willfully. When Jesus said, render to Caesar what's Caesar's and render to God what's God's, that isn't to say that governments have this, free work of taxation anytime they want to. And in fact, on a later tax issue, Jesus told Peter to go get a coin out of a fish's mouth, and he said, just give it to him because for our reputation. He didn't authorize all that. So anyway, huge problem. The way we've set up our tax system, where there's no rule of law involved, is much worse than taxation in general, and something we should address, and rightly so.
Yeah. Agreed. And if I'm going to get into it more on Brandon House Live, but you can go to worldviewtube.com/IRS. Have the whole article, press release today. IRS slaps $49,000 fine on conservative Christian broadcast organization for mailing tax payment during agency's 2-day online system outage. This was in 2021. My CPA tried to make the payment online. Their system was down during COVID and no one was answering the phone. More than that, they eventually were shredding, according to a whistleblower here in town, the IRS was shredding tractor-trailer loads of tax returns and checks. They were like, oh, it's just too much paperwork, we'll just shred it. But their system was down for 2 days, so my accountant said overnight the check for payroll taxes. And then they sent me a bill for $43,000. We appealed it and said, here, you were down. We had to overnight a check. They sent back a letter saying, we abate it. You're done. Don't worry about it. You're fine. 2 years later, they come back and they say, we've changed our mind. You owe us the $43,000 plus interest, over $49,000. We actually got a second letter of abatement on appeal. And then it got reopened. And so we got 2 letters saying, don't worry about it. We've waived those each time. The third time, they said, we don't care. We want our money. And the IRS agent that appealed it, helped me appeal it, who agreed with me, said, you do understand that you're paying this $49,000, not because it's a late fee, a late penalty. You paid your tax on time. She said, I have it in the system when your check arrived, overnighted. You're paying it because your payroll tax was at a high number, that if you pay it with check, you're going to get fined. If you'd paid it online, you wouldn't have gotten fined, but you wrote a check. I said, but wait a minute. What if your system had been down for a week? How much would I have been fined? She said, that's a great question. Let me ask my supervisor. We're still waiting on the answer. So basically we were, toast if we did, toast if we didn't, to put it nicely, right? But it's not a fine for late taxes. No, she said, you've paid your taxes on time. She said, it was because you overnighted a check. And she said, I understand why you overnighted a check. You wanted to get us the money because the system was down and you didn't want fines and penalties. But She said this is wrong, but her supervisor said no.
I want people to grasp something here. There are these progressive Christians out there screaming and yelling about the removal of USAID money and saying that we're going to be killing people. What they want to do is have the people that you're dealing with supposedly give this money to take our taxes and then hand this money over to organizations where we already know the facts that USAID, 80% of the money going into USAID for relief funds in particular was going into the pockets of NGOs. It wasn't going to the people who were supposed to be fed. But yet, if we resist this, we are authorizing the killing of children. Literally, that's the argument that they're making. This is the government is a scam. Totally. It is something not to ever be trusted, even when we've restrained it. If we ever get to the place where we restrain it where it needs to go and where it originally was laid out to be, we still should never trust it. In fact, even the first few Congresses did things that were really wrong that got corrected because the system was still healthy at the time. Do not trust government. It is not your friend. It does not provide anything of value. It does not do anything but steal the productivity of citizens. And we should only ever give it as much power as is absolutely necessary for holding the country together. And that's roughly defense and funding courts. By the way, courts which suck right now.
Yep.
But nonetheless, that's about it. And we need to recognize that this is what we should be fighting for.
And 100% agree. And, we were going to do a Worldview weekend rally in Des Moines, Iowa this fall. We already have the hotel booked. We haven't signed the contract, but we have the date. We're going to do a Worldview weekend rally in Iowa, free Christian Worldview weekend rally in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, and one in Rockford, Illinois. Those have now been canceled. The IRS stole the money that would have allowed us, in part, to have the funds and the discretionary income to go and do free ministry with these free rallies. So if the IRS's goal is to damage our organization and stop us from reaching people, we had to cut those 2 Christian Worldview rallies. We also will not be replacing 2 people leaving. So we can try to make up that $50,000 and put it back in our bank account because that's the money we need to pay future payroll taxes with. So if the IRS's goal and the progressives and the Marxists in our government was to damage us, they are succeeding. We are losing our liberties and freedom, which include the liberty to hold a Christian event. That's part of our liberty. They are destroying our right for peaceful assembly, constitutional right, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, by stealing money that's not rightfully theirs. After they had sent us 2 abatement letters saying, don't worry about it. Then they changed their mind.
If that process had been rational and had been based upon the facts of the case, as I understand them when you're sharing them with me, obviously I don't know all the details, but if we take on face value what you're saying, which I believe you, by the way, I'm not trying to say I don't, but if we take that on face value, they have made a capricious decision to gather up more money. They have not made a decision that says, listen, let's give the benefit of the doubt with having the information that we have. It's one thing if you were withholding information or it was very difficult to get info from you, or there was some question about the facts that were in front. The facts are abundantly clear, and they still made a capricious decision because they can. Congress has given the IRS the authority to make decisions that are capricious like this. That is the dirty little secret of the IRS. Remember, the definition of government is legal force. Romans 13 makes that very clear. Anyone that questions my definition, that is the definition. We give the authority of force to a government to do certain things within a prescribed set of rules. In the United States, that prescription is very narrow. Not only do we keep the authorities of government very narrow, we also created a constitution of negative rights. And what that means is this. Government doesn't have authority in and of itself. It is only given rights that we've negated out, and I'm not giving the proper legal definition here, just a way to describe it, that we negate out of the rights that we have by God. That's why it says in the Declaration that we are endowed by our Creator with rights. We cede some portion of those rights in a prescribed fashion for government, and it gets no more. And we hold the authority to take those rights away from government at our will. This is a government of we the people, not of the government. And IRS agents don't understand this concept. Most people in government don't understand this concept. Sadly, most members of Congress on both sides of the aisle don't understand this concept. And we need to inform the people that it is much different. It is absurd what the IRS does. It's absurd what the government does with our money. And we need to consistently speak out against it.
But why do we not see more members of Congress, Rand Paul, Chip Roy, Thomas Massey? Why do we not see them screaming more and more about this? Because again, as I'm saying on Brown's Live tonight, I am just one of thousands of people that have these kind of experiences. My CPA has the most ridiculous cases, and she's a like dot every I, cross every T, typical cast. I mean, she'd be like casting out of Hollywood if you wanted a female CPA that had the ruler and was smacking my knuckles. You know, she does that. She'll smack my knuckles, basically, verbally. I need this. I need that. I asked for this 2 days ago. I still don't have it. You better get it over here. You know, she's not fooling around. I'm a little scared of her, to be honest with you. She's a real serious CPA, which is why I have her. She will say, she was telling stories to the chief of staff of one congressman that he couldn't believe. And she's like, they're just making it up. It's not in the code. They're making it up. And I'm like, where is that in the code? You know it's not in the code. You know you're making it up. And basically they're saying, yeah, what are you going to do about it, sweetheart? And so where are these members of Congress? Why are they not screaming?
Yeah, they are. Well, the three you mentioned are screaming. I don't know how much more screaming they can do. I don't know how much more retribution Thomas Massey has to suffer for calling these sorts of things out, right? I mean, he's the focal point of everyone's ire right now, it seems. So the problem is not those guys. I've said this on a few different interviews and saying it to various people. For all of whatever fault you can find with Thomas Massey, if we had 220 Thomas Masseys in Congress, Donald Trump would get everything he wants and more. And the other person that has taken Trump's ire is Tom Tillis. If we had 220 Tom Tillises in the House, he would get nothing of what he wants. We got to understand who the real enemy is here. It's the members of Congress on the Republican side of the aisle who don't read the Constitution, or if they do, they don't care about it. It doesn't mean anything to them. They just want to do what they need to do to please their personal situation, whatever K Street people they think that they need to be loyal to, and they will not look at the Constitution and say, you know what, I don't think we're supposed to do this. I don't read it here. They don't have that idea about them. And of course, it takes political time to reverse us back in the direction we need to go. And there are compromises to be made along the way if that's what we're doing is reversing things. We have yet to significantly reverse our course of action back to our constitutional restraints. I urge every person listening to this to read Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Trust me, it's an easy read. The language is not legalese. It's very straightforward. There are a couple words there you might not understand, but they're in parts of that article that are not important to the point we're making. If you want to know how restrained government is in the Constitution, read that and compare it to what happens in Washington, D.C. like right now. And this is where I'm very disappointed with Republicans. Even though I'm really happy about some aspects of the big, beautiful bill, there are key aspects of it that are so far away from reality that they could have done and didn't do. Not because Democrats were holding them up. And as I've said, the weak part of the Trump agenda is Republicans in Congress. That's our problem. And they get into these internecine battles where, whatever, you may not like Rand Paul's personality or Thomas Massey's personality, and they make their mistakes too. But please, who's really out for the American people? Tom Tillis and Lindsey Graham? or Thomas Massey and Rand Paul? If I have to compare those two, I already know the answer. It's really easy.
Absolutely. Well, then we got a great article we'll get to tomorrow night with Leo. Trump's BBB, just passed by Senate, will massively expand the digital biometric surveillance state for years to come. I mean, there's a lot of garbage in this 900-page bill. But I think there were some guys like Massey trying to point this out. And they got chewed up by MAGA.
Yeah. And I have to say this. I worked for Thomas. Thomas Massey actually reads the Constitution on a regular basis. I just want to repeat or build upon what I said earlier, just a moment ago. I'm pretty certain that the vast majority of members of Congress have never read the Constitution in their life, except if they ran across it because someone was talking about it, or they saw it on a piece of paper, then it just by happenstance happened to be there. None of them go to consult the Constitution. And here's the point, people. The Constitution is the United States. I mean, we have a United States of America, which is a government system and an organization of independent states that came together under a federal system of government. That is all outlined in the Constitution. Everything you do beyond that is not the United States. It's not the governing principle that we were founded upon. So if you're doing anything beyond it, you are violating the trust placed in the American people when the states ratified the Constitution in 1789. It is absolutely absurd for anyone to try to argue that these members of Congress have any thought of that, because they don't go in that direction. Their concern is whatever they think the political situation they have is. You think of a Bill Cassidy in Louisiana. Bill Cassidy is such a hack for K Street. Everything he does is to help pharmaceutical companies. It's one thing to have a pharmaceutical company in your state and you're a senator and you listen to them because they're a constituent, and that's all appropriate. But when everything you do benefits pharmaceutical companies and none of it benefits people, it's absurd. I just saw a video of Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator, just this weekend. And he made the statement, he's got he's got prostate cancer. It's metastasized into his bones. And he's actually saying, because he was saying people should take the vaccine, and he did an analysis of it, and he's come back and said, I was wrong. The anti-vaxxers were right. And why is he saying that? Because of the harm caused to so many people. And as he said, I'm never going to know for sure that the vaccine did this to me, but I see the evidence, and many people are suffering in their bodies because of this vaccine. And they're suffering, they're dying. What I didn't know to be true or false, that they found these long strands of fibrous material in bodies. Mortuaries are finding this. I thought, oh man, that's maybe some odd thing. No, we're finding out that's actually happening, and it's all vaccinated people. What does that mean? I don't know precisely. We're still learning the science. The reality is this vaccine has destroyed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, maybe as many or more than actually died of the vaccine itself, the virus itself. And many of those people dying because of poor hospital methods, because we wouldn't allow other things to come in and try to figure out treatments. We had to go with what the pharmaceutical companies wanted the treatments to be. We need to understand this government is out of control. It is taking over the lives of people. It doesn't have a right to us, and it needs to be restrained in a way that serves the people, not the politicians. Now, that's kind of up to us and how we vote, and we need to be looking at that. But it's also up to these people to be held accountable to it. Absolutely. That's why we elected Donald Trump, is to bring that accountability, and we want to see it happen.
Yeah, and we're not. Let's get to Pam Bondi real quick. But you don't know what I'm talking about right now. It's live, but you set it up good tonight. Over at worldviewreport.com, we have an article tonight. I'll be interviewing the guy that wrote it, Jeff Childers. Highly troubling insurance and Social Security statistics reveal 2025 spike in deaths is growing. The number of people dropping out of Obamacare and not getting Social Security payments anymore. It's because they're dead. Why are they dying? And why is it a massive spike? And oh, by the way, the funeral industry, some of those companies are up over 100%, 160%. In their services because so many people are dying, okay? Let's get to Pam Bondi. MAGA is furious tonight. MAGA people that, are big social media people are calling for Bongino and Patel and Pam Bondi, Cash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi to all resign over this whole Epstein thing. Comments?
I'm very concerned about what happened over the weekend that was confirmed in Caroline Leavitt's press conference today, that this memo is real and that they're telling us there's no client list when we've heard over and over again from these people when they came into the Trump administration that there's a client list. Pam Bondi said she had tens of thousands of documents essentially dumped on her after the whole kerfuffle took place. Listen, I don't know what the actual conclusion is when it relates to Jeffrey Epstein and criminality of all these people. I mean, there's a lot of that to adjudicate and figure out. But here's what I do know. The number one thing that needs to happen right now, if they're going to make these conclusions, the one thing we voted for was not that all of us were right in what we thought was happening with the Epstein files. That's not the number one thing. The number one thing is to be transparent with the files and show us so we can also make an evaluation. We do not need government patting us on the head. Oh, little boy and girl, just want you to know this is what happened, just in case you were wondering. We're being transparent about it. That's not transparency. There's so much in government that needs to be open. We were told the JFK files were coming out. Well, we got a lot more than we ever did, but we don't got everything. The RFK senior files were coming out. Those, as far as I know, haven't come out at all. We're supposed to get this transparency. And I've said for years, the top secret classified situation is such that maybe somewhere between 70 to 90%, by my estimation, I mean, I'm kind of going like this in the air and looking at it, but 70 to 90% of this classification, we learned this from the WikiLeaks dumps. 70 to 90% of that stuff is just political stuff that people were embarrassed by and didn't want anyone to know. It didn't. Our national security was not harmed by the Edward Snowden revelations. It was not harmed by the WikiLeaks revelations. All that stuff was political stuff. And we still cannot get ourselves free from what Edward Snowden revealed, because guess what? It wasn't an international threat that he revealed. It was a national threat. It was our own government threatening us, taking our rights away. This is the problem with government. It believes it has sovereign authority over our lives, and it doesn't. It is only given enough authority in the Constitution to protect our rights. Its whole purpose is to protect rights, not to order society or take care of what people are doing and monitor them and all this sort of thing. I mean, the founding fathers, if they knew what was happening, they'd be rolling over in their graves. Yep. It's absolutely absurd what we're living with.
And the fact that we just celebrate the 4th of July and act like we're free, they'd be like, what is wrong with you people? You're celebrating like you have liberty and freedom. You guys don't know what liberty and freedom is. You think liberty and freedom is because you can watch Netflix and whatever and do TikToks?
In fact, liberty and freedom is not about being able to do whatever you want to do.
That's right.
Liberty and freedom is about having the ability to do good, to live a moral life that is helpful to others, to raise your family in a moral way, whether you're a husband or a wife or a child therewith, or that child that goes to the next generation and wants to get married. The freedom is about the ability for people of goodwill and of moral behavior to succeed so that a society can grow and thrive. We've turned all that on top of its head, to the point that, like I've said about the Libertarian Party, for example, many times, their mission statement has always been, if drugs and prostitution were legal, we'd all be free. And I always say, if neither of them were legal and we were free everywhere else, we'd be the most happy, wonderful people in the world. And maybe we could have those arguments then. But that's the thing. We turn everything on its head. The things that we think are supposed to be so important are the things that are not important. LGBTQI rights, DEI, all these things that are supposed to be about liberty and freedom, and they're not at all.
Yep.
They're about taking freedom away. We need to turn this argument on its head because it's gone against us. Now, we made some great strides this year. I think even this year we made some strides. We got a long way to go, baby.
Yeah, we got a long way to go. That's for sure. And I'm not sure that it's going to happen because I think there's going to be a big problem come midterms. I think the president's distracted with the Middle East. I think he's spending too much time thinking about the Middle East, talking about the Middle East. I think we just gave a bunch of money to Israel in this BBB. Now, I'm a Christian Zionist, but I've said it over and over for the last few years. Israel doesn't deserve any of our money. They're a very wealthy country, very wealthy. And they can borrow money from us, but we don't need to be giving them $500 million that I heard was in this BBB. Is that right?
I don't recall the precise number, but that's the thing. They don't need our money. You know, it's kind of funny. The Biden administration gave a few $1 billion to Taiwan for its defense. Do you know that was the first time Taiwan ever took money from us for decades prior? Even from the moment that we recognized them as an independent nation. And even when Jimmy Carter had taken that particular designation away and went neutral on it, they've made so much money. Their economy's done so well. I'm very familiar with Taiwan because I've been there and I've been involved in that policy when I worked on Capitol Hill. And I'm going to tell you, they always have had the money to be able to take care of their own defense. They just have struggled being able to buy certain weapons. Israel doesn't struggle as much with the type of weapons it can buy from us, but we pay for them, and they don't need it. They are a very healthy economy, and there's no need for them to get our money. I want Israel to succeed as a country. They're a sovereign nation, and they should not be treated the way they are. Even when we may have some disgust or concern or whatever about their politicians, I have some disgust and concern about our own politicians, and I think we're free. So whether the politicians are good or bad or we like them is not the issue. The question is, do they have a free society? They do, even with all their faults. And that's fine. I'm supportive of that. I just don't want to pay money for it. We got to stop sending money anywhere around the world, and we need to start doing our own thing very well. That is actually the inspiration of who we are as a country, and what we do is what has brought freedom worldwide, because it's inspired countries to do better. We need to be an inspiration again, not a benefactor.
Indeed. And then finally, for run out of time, the heartbreak in Texas. Man, I now am reading that all the missing girls from that camp have been found. You know, the remaining ones that were missing, poorly, they all passed away. They're all dead. The ones that were missing, they now have apparently found their remains. That's what I'm reading tonight.
I haven't seen that yet, but I was very touched by a video I saw of those who had been part of the camp and were still alive, driving a bus past the facility, singing praise songs to God, praying. I was very touched by that. And by the way that you hear the radical left in the media and elsewhere talking about what happened here, thank goodness we have freedom, because every one of the lies that purported to say that Donald Trump's cuts caused all this death, it didn't at all. In fact, if there's any government action that caused the death, it was local authorities weren't as well prepared. Michael Schellenberger very capably documented that this is just a normal tragedy. It's not climate change. Hill country is always subject to potential flash flooding, and has had many instances, at least a half a dozen of them over the last 100 years.
Yeah, it happened in 87. It happened back in 87. The Guadalupe River rose. I've got videos where William Shatner's doing a report on it. Others are doing reports on it.
It's a beautiful area, and it's tragic when this happens, but part of beauty sometimes is risk, right? So let's just understand, it is tragic what has happened. This is a horrible situation, and we need to pray for the people in the area, for the first responders in the area, and for the families that are suffering.
And they obviously need to put up some kind of early warning system where the sirens go off, 24 hours in advance or whatever. Because I guess the U.S. Weather Service put something out at 1 p.m. the day before. Those sirens should have blasted, which everybody would know. We got to go. We got to get out of here. So,
but again, that's on the local community officials, not the Trump administration.
That's right.
They overstaffed the National Weather Service in the area.
That's exactly right.
He did what they needed to do.
That's on the local. You're right about that. All right, Jim Pfaff, theconservativecaucus.org. All right. Thanks for watching. Take care.